Focus on Aging Adults is sponsored in part by AARP.
Pennsylvania has one of the largest aging populations in the country. Our aging adults are vibrant, active contributors to our society. PCN, in partnership with AARP, present Focus on Aging Adults.
Welcome to Focus on Aging Adults. I'm Larry Casper. This program is brought to you in partnership between PCN and the AARP of Pennsylvania. Today we're talking about Governor Josh Shapiro's plan for aging Pennsylvanians. Our guests are the State Secretary of Aging, Jason Kavulich, founder and president of the Afflerbach Group, Roy Afflerbach, and the PA State Director of AARP, Bill Johnston Walsh. Bill, get us started. Why does Pennsylvania need a plan for the aging?
Well, as you know, Larry, Pennsylvania is one of the fastest aging states in the country. Right now, it's 1 out of every 4 individuals are over the age of 60, but by 2030, that's gonna be about 3.8 million individuals that will be over the age of 60, and that'll be 1 in 3. So 1 out of every 3 Pennsylvanians will be over the age of 60. It's going to be the largest aging group in the state, in the Commonwealth. And at AARP, we realized, working with our colleagues, both in an elected office as well as with our other nonprofits, we knew we had to be doing something about this. So when Governor Shapiro was candidate Shapiro, we AARP went and talked to him, and top of our list was having this aging plan, this multi-sector plan about what are we going to do over the next 10 years. We really need to look at our programs and our policies, what's in place, what do we need to have in place, and we need to do that. And thankfully, the governor did that. He brought a great secretary in with Secretary Kavulich that was right on board from day one. I'm pretty sure, and it's something that has been in the works now for over a year.
Jason, some of our viewers are meeting you for the very first time right now, so give them a brief bio on your position.
So my name's Jason Kavulich. I am the Secretary of Aging for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I spent 24 years in the human services world prior to my coming into this role, and in my last job I was the Director of the Area Agency on Aging in Lackawanna County. So, when I interviewed with the governor and the chief of staff, one of the key parts of my interview was focusing on a multi-sector, on a plan for older Pennsylvanians, and talking about how we had no vision for how to move forward, and the nation is not really prepared for this historic moment that we're living through, and that is this large increase in the older adult population. So coming in and taking over the department, we really set our efforts to working with our stakeholder partners like AARP and others to work to build out a plan for the next 10 years that was going to help Pennsylvanians age in their communities, age safely, and really have a better age-friendly Pennsylvania all across the board. But the most important thing that we did in that development, and what sets us apart, is that we did this collaboratively. With the governor's executive order, he called on the Department of Aging to convene stakeholders, not to build a plan, to convene stakeholders and work with them to build a plan. So we have over 30 agencies in both the state and our nonprofit partners and other community partners working to pull this plan together. We have the Long-Term Care Council that helped guide this process. And there's 35 members to the Long-Term Care Council, with all the chairs of the Aging House and Senate committees, and in addition to other appointees throughout the Commonwealth that really helped us make sure that we were guiding this plan the way the Pennsylvanians told us it needed to go. And that is the other most critical part that we did. We worked with the 52 area agencies on aging, AARP, and others to listen. We had over 200 listening sessions all across the Commonwealth in all 67 counties. We listened in different languages. We listened to individuals with different abilities. We listened to specialized, marginalized communities. And that feedback, especially the feedback from older Pennsylvanians directly, the over 20,000 comments and surveys and points of information that we received back, really was the foundation to this plan. So Pennsylvania did design this plan. The department and its partners are those who put the information together and shaped it the way we were directed to.
And I just want to add quickly that it wasn't, you would think that just people over the age of 50 or 60 would be responding to this. It was all ages.
Yes.
We had 18-year-olds telling back in about, they're all going to be aging in place, either talking about themselves, their parents, their grandparents, what are the needs that they're seeing right now. So it wasn't just people 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds. It was, you know, the younger 18, 20, 30, 40-year-olds that were also putting into this.
Tell me more about that perspective, Bill, that of young people. I'm just interested into what they think is important here.
Well, I think they come from a different perspective. You know, people that are in their 60s and 70s are living on these programs and policies right now. So, you know, maybe they'll say, okay, this is working, this is not working. People that are younger are in this, you know, a lot of these sandwich generations and individuals that they're not old enough for the programs that right now, and they're taking care of their kids and they're taking care of an elderly parent, and they're seeing it from that caregiver's perspective and what it means to be able to take care of somebody. What programs do we need? Where do the dollars really need to go? You know, keeping people in the community as long as possible.
And before we go any farther, Roy, tell us about what relevant experience you bring to this discussion today.
Well, as you know, I represent a number of organizations that deal with older adults. That includes the senior centers, adult day service centers, Meals on Wheels, Southwestern Pennsylvania Partnership for Aging, the P4A, the state organization for AAAs in Pennsylvania. I've known Secretary Kovulich for a few years now. I'm delighted that he is the secretary because he truly understands these issues and the ways in which we can go about addressing them. The irony of it is in Pennsylvania that we have one of the best states for retirees to retire at for a number of reasons, not just because we don't tax pensions and we don't tax Social Security, but also because we have a number of programs already in place that are able to assist older adults, some through our lottery program. We're still the only state in the nation that donates nearly 100% of the lottery proceeds, other than the winnings of course, directly to programs for older adults. So there's a lot going on here. Many people just don't realize how much is going on, and that's part of what this plan is all about. As the Secretary, I'm sure, will elucidate for us, part of the plan is to make sure we get the word out to people that here are the programs that are available, here's how you can go about accessing them, and just getting that word out alone is extremely important at this time.
Jason, as far as you were concerned, what was step one in approaching this plan?
I think step one was gathering the right people and getting the right players to the table to start talking about how do we take those first steps in convening stakeholders in reaching out to the Commonwealth. To
Area Agencies on Aging, who else?
Area Agencies on Aging, AARP of Pennsylvania. The agencies that Roy enumerated on, they are all of the partners that really came together and did listening sessions and did surveys and made sure they had the one-on-one conversations with older adults whenever they touched older adults in their lives. So those partners, and then our state partner agencies. You would not think that that DEP and DCNR and would be so involved in getting our multi-sector plan.
What new did they bring to the table that might not have been obvious at first?
Well, let's just talk about Secretary Siger and the work that he's doing. Okay, so he's out there redoing main streets all across Pennsylvania. Okay, we heard loud and clear from older Pennsylvanians. We want to feel safer. We want to have better access. We want to be able to walk and navigate and use our chairs if necessary and be able to roam downtown freely. Every time he does a Main Street over, every time he improves the lighting on Main Avenue or the curbs on Main Avenue, he's helping an older adult. He's helping an older adult live in that community, access services, access retail in that community. He is doing his part to uplift the cause of older adults. We just are not connecting the dots. When you look at the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources and Secretary Dunn and all the wonderful work that she does in our state park system, okay? Our older adult population probably consumes more of the state park than any of us. They're there all the time. They're there during their retirement. They bring their grandkids there. If their grandparents raising grandchildren or grandparents just have their grandchildren up there for the weekend, they use our state parks a lot. But they're also the volunteers that help the state park system keep going. Connecting that to the plan, connecting that this work is already happening across the Commonwealth, that all of our departments are touching the lives of older Pennsylvanians, and bringing that message back into the plan and communicating out really uplifts aging in Pennsylvania. It shows that aging in Pennsylvania is a great thing because of how we care about the older adults that live in our communities, how we support them, and how we respect the fact that they are our volunteers, our coaches, our friends, our mentors, our good neighbors, and that we need to do our part to make sure they can live among us for as long as they can. You know, Roy mentioned a very important partner too that we undervalue sometimes and don't talk enough about, and that's programs like the Life and Adult Day programs. Those programs, partners like that, coming to us saying, we need to make sure we build a tactic into Aging Our Way PA that highlights the good work that adult day centers do for older Pennsylvanians, how that work helps us with the direct care worker shortage, how that work helps keep people in the community longer, how it provides important respite to caregivers who are essential to this plan. All of these are interconnected. All of this work is interconnected. And if I could not do this plan without my team back at the Department of Aging, I couldn't have worked this plan without the two gentlemen sitting here next to me today, and I couldn't have done it without all of the Pennsylvanians that contributed.
Now, as state government hosted these hearings statewide, Jason, you called them listening sessions. Can you tell me what kind of pattern emerged? In other words, there were, I understand, a couple hundred hearings. So you must have heard about some dominant point several times, and then you said to yourself, we got to get on that.
Well, three main themes: housing, direct services, and transportation, all across the state. We heard that in the same amounts. So housing being the biggest.
Yeah, what is it about housing? More affordable housing, for instance?
The whole spectrum. Everything from more affordable housing to better access to housing to property taxes. We heard it all, but it all comes into one big bucket of housing and making sure older Pennsylvanians have safe, stable, affordable housing available to them in the communities that they live in.
Interestingly enough, a number of cities in the Commonwealth have begun trying to address these things over the past couple of decades. Presently, we have Age Friendly Pittsburgh, which is a nice organization, looking at all these kinds of things that the Secretary is talking about. Back at the turn of the century, literally at the turn of the century, in 2002, when I was mayor of Allentown, we began looking at a number of these things at that particular time. We didn't have nearly as good a grasp then as we do now across the whole state. But as the Secretary indicated, there are many areas in which we can address the needs of older adults that don't necessarily occur to people because they're not older yet themselves.
Right.
And unless
that's why I was interested in the teenagers' point of view before, because old age is so far over the horizon, it might be hard to conceive of it.
Right, but here's an example for you. As you've known before, because another program we were on, I cared for my mother until she was 97 and a half. When it got to the last 6 months of her life, I really couldn't do that anymore, but my youngest daughter stepped forward to do it, and she has 3 smaller children. So the 3 smaller children were also helping for that daily care, and they began to find out what it means as older adults begin to need more and more care. This is the kind of thing that I think brings 18 and 20-year-olds, because there are more of these households where they're now helping to care for their grandparents or their parents, and they understand this is an issue that's going to be coming more and more to the front because we have more and more people growing older. Senator Schwenk said it well the other day.
And now young people are seeing it up close.
Yes, and Senator Schwenk said it well the other day at the hearing that Secretary Kavulich testified at. She said, you know, we're talking about people between the ages of 60 and 100. That's a lot of people. You know, that's 40 years of individuals that we're talking about. So clearly we have to be able to make these kinds of plans ahead and begin to implement them.
And I think the other case too is that I think, you know, with Secretary Kavulich and Governor Shapiro really knowing that this just can't be done at the state level. And getting all these voices in, so it wasn't just of the 20,000 thing, listening, the 200 listening sessions, the 20,000 responses that came in. They also heard from elected officials, and not just at the state level, but also at the local level. You have to remember, if you start talking about housing or transportation or some changes in walkability or different places like that, it has to start with mayors. It has to start with city council, county councils. And I think the governor and the secretary knew that when they were developing this plan. And they said, okay, we're going to hear from everyone because we can't all do it at our level. It has to be done at all levels. If we're going to change and make sure that every Pennsylvanian is going to be able to age in place wherever they are, we need everyone to be working on this plan.
And before we get into the priorities of the plan, let's consider the value of the area agencies on aging. And you guys have referred to that as the 3 A's, so I'm going to do that from now on, just so I don't want to lose anybody at home. The value of the 3 A's, tell me more about what they face on a daily basis. And after all, there are 52 statewide, so there's some geographic distribution there. And I wonder if any geographic region has unique challenges compared to others.
Well, I'm happy to jump in being a former AAA director and advocate. One, every agency has unique challenges. There's not one that has greater challenges than the other. Rural communities face challenges, urban communities face challenges, and everybody in between. So every one of the 52 area agencies on aging has a unique challenge based on their community, and that's the way they're designed. They're designed to be community focused. They're designed to be responsive to community needs. Their design is specific in that, and so you look at them. Some of them are struggling with staff retention and recruitment. Okay, that's not uncommon in this current marketplace. Some are struggling with resources and a growing population. They have not really seen a large investment in the area agencies on aging in years beyond count. So you're looking at agencies that have a growing population, rapidly growing population, and trying to meet those individuals' needs and trying to build out programming that serves their community the best they can. So resources, employment, making sure that their ranks are filled, and also purchase services. You know, they provide services like personal care, like home delivered meals, like transportation in all of these communities across the Commonwealth. As the cost of those goods go up, as normal business continues to increase its cost, the resources they have to consume those services and provide them to older adults becomes less and less as time goes by. So their challenges are great, but they're persistent and they're resilient, and they continue to do their very best to provide for every community across Pennsylvania. And I know that my colleagues here would agree with me. You know, they get creative because they have to, because they really believe what they're doing and how they must serve older Pennsylvanians.
Give me an example, please.
Give an example of how they get creative.
Yeah, maybe an unusual situation turns up and then they have to figure it out.
Well, there's emergencies every day. There's, you know, in this heating crisis that we're going to have right now, in this heat wave that we're living through, all of us today, I can tell you that there's going to be an older adult that doesn't have either an air conditioning unit or is displaced from their home and in danger because of the heat, and that one of the AAAs will have to find some kind of solution and make sure that that older adult gets to a place to stay, gets a resource, gets something, so that they can remain in a safe environment and not necessarily have to go into a more restrictive level of care. That'll happen in the next few days, okay? But, you know, in real time, you also see, unfortunately, we see the protective services cases, and we see those cases of self-neglect and financial exploitation. They'll be dealing with that over the next 3 days, too, and trying to find ways to make sure that they can get services in to help someone stay in their home for as long as they possibly can.
So it sounds like the AAAs have to be on their toes during a heat wave.
Yeah. I think the other piece too is that a large section of the Aging Our Way PA, that the plan, the aging plan, is really unlocking access, and a lot of people don't realize that the AAAs, the area agencies on aging, are there for them.
Access to services we're talking about?
Access to services, what's out there for them, how can they get them, how can they or a loved one be able to receive these? Because I think what happens over and over again is that people don't realize the AAA is there until they're in a hospital or in a situation where they can't come back home.
You already have an emergency on
without
your hands.
these services. And so I think education, and that you'll see that's part of the plan, education and outreach is a large part of what we need to be doing, letting people know what programs are out there right now, and then obviously how can we improve those programs as we move forward.
Communication, not crisis.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, another example of the type
communication might avoid a crisis.
Yeah, 100%
exactly.
correct.
Because another example of something that just drops out of the sky is the closing of a nursing home. The AAA in that service area gets the call right away. What are we going to do with these 15, 18, 20, 30 people that now suddenly have to be placed somewhere else because this home is closing? And that's beginning to happen more and more. We've just gotten word there's at least 16 nursing homes in Western Pennsylvania that are either filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy or are already closing.
And this is due to rising costs, which Jason touched on.
It's due to any number of things, but yes, it could be rising costs, it could be outdated infrastructure, could be the disability, rather the inability to be able to obtain sufficient workers. There's any number of things that impact it, but it happens. And it's the AAAs who get the call about how can we place these people, where can we find adequate housing for them and adequate services at the same time.
Let's try to dig into the governor's plan for aging Pennsylvanians. I understand he has 5 priorities, so I'm just going to prompt you gentlemen with each one. We'll see what happens. One of the priorities is aging in a healthy and active way. That seems a somewhat broad goal. Jason, how do you achieve that?
Well, it is broad. And remember, this plan is intentionally broad, and it is a living document. As the governor will say anytime he talks about it, this is a living document that sits at the center of the table for us to take, to update, to continue to use. It doesn't sit on a shelf, waiting for us to reference.
Make changes as needed as you go.
It's a living document for 10 years, and it will change, it will adjust. So that describes all the ways an individual is living, whether they're connecting to a senior center to stay healthy, or connected to nutritional resources and information services, to whether we're providing chore services in an individual's home that helps them with some of the, people think of chore services and they think of house cleaning, but something as simple as doing laundry and changing sheets for an individual really helps keep them safe and keep them at home. And we don't think of something so simple as that as having such an impact, on someone's life. But it really does.
And you have a good face-to-face encounter, too.
Correct. So the older adult gets that human connectivity, plus they get the service, plus they have something, done that they need to do that, it keeps them. It keeps the dignity of living alone at the level it should be. And I think a lot of us have to remember people want to live with dignity, and they deserve to live with dignity and respect as they age in their communities. And we have the ability to help them in a very meaningful way. So not only accessing, senior centers and other wonderful community service activities, but being active volunteers, staying engaged with your community on different levels, doing things that you enjoy. There's 11,000 volunteers that are connected to the Pennsylvania Department on Aging. 11,000 across the state, working with all the 52 agencies on aging, working in all the numerous programs that we provide. That gives people wonderful purpose and helps us push the work of the Aging Network forward. But we couldn't do it without them. When you think about that, and then the number of hours that they commit and the dollars that add up for the work that's done. But more importantly, it keeps that person connected to community, involved in community, and helping their community move forward.
And of course, all these things you're talking about in that regard are the social aspect as well. As far back as 1938, doctors were beginning to recognize that lack of social contact was contributing to ill health and mental health as well. But here we are nearly 100 years later. 90 years later, and we're just finally coming to terms with the idea that we need to be able to find ways to have older adults be able to interact more socially with the folks around them. We know that from state to state, depending on which state it is, you've got 20 to 30% of adults who live by themselves. And the only contact they have with someone else is when a home delivered meals person shows up at their door, or maybe they catch the postman, and that's it. And we also know that many of these same folks are experiencing more rapid decline of their health, both physical and mental, because of that lack of social interaction. So very key point that most people have not thought of until most recently, maybe 5-10 years ago, we started really looking at it.
And it's great that you brought up behavioral health challenges too. And older adults told us that we need to focus on their behavioral health needs. There are not enough services available to them. We have a high suicide rate in the older adult population that oftentimes go unmentioned. And they told us, we need better services in this space, and that's one of the ways we're helping people age actively in their community too, by connecting them to resources and building up better resources.
And you'll hear constantly from both Roy and from Jason and the Secretary is that basically people want to stay in their community. At AARP, we do survey after survey, and 95% of people want to stay in their home, where they raise their family, where they have their friends, where they have their church, where they have their community. And it just goes back to what the Secretary said about dignity and respect. They would like these programs to help them out. They're not asking for handouts. What they're asking for is to be able to support them within the community of staying in their home as long as possible.
And Bill, what you're saying dovetails with the next priority of the governor's plan that I'm going to talk about, and it's eliminating barriers while staying in familiar surroundings. So we understand the familiar surroundings part. So let's talk about the barriers that get in the way of that.
Well, I think some of the barriers that we've talked about. So if you want to stay in your home, there's a property tax issue. You want to be able to afford that. You want to have updates to your home, like if you need a new roof, or if you get to a point where you can't make the stairs anymore and your bedroom's on the second floor, you want to be able to
property taxes and essential repairs or barriers.
And utilities. Keeping utility costs down so that people can stay in their homes as long as possible. Again, that is where the plan sort of lays out in a broad way how can we focus on some of those issues as we move forward.
And other maintenance issues at a home. When you own a property, there's still snow removal, there's still yard work, there's still and those challenges become harder and harder. And without recognizing also that we have to be good neighbors in this space too. Not every solution comes with a price tag. Some of it comes with awareness, like Bill had said earlier. Being aware that there's someone in your neighborhood with a challenge like that, people will rise to the occasion. We live in good communities all across Pennsylvania. None of us here at this table would turn our back to a neighbor that needed help taking out their garbage. None of us. We would all jump in and help in a minute without thanks or without being asked. So little victories like that is what helps someone stay at home.
And again, this is where our lottery is so valuable to us, because if you don't qualify for Medicare and Medicaid, all right, that is for the very poorest folks, okay? But you might qualify for Medicare, but not Medicaid, but you still need the services that Medicaid would pay for. Well, in our case, we have the Lottery Options Program, and that's on a sliding scale. So individuals who are not far above the Medicaid cutoff come in and probably get options for no sliding fee added to it. But as you go up the ladder, they finally top out at some number, whatever it may be. Now, interestingly enough, the federal government's beginning to frown upon that, even though these are not federal funds. They're lottery funds.
Oh?
Yes, so we're taking on that battle as well, that the federal government should not have any say into how lottery funds in Pennsylvania are used, especially since we use some of them to help support Medicaid for the federal government.
Well, why does the Fed feel that this is within their purview, Roy? Any theories?
Their theory is that any individual who is of an older adult age, whatever that is, whether it's the cutoff at 55, 60, or 65, should be treated equally regardless of the money source. And that's the battle that we're having right now in Congress as they move forward to reauthorize the Older Americans Act, which is the source of most of the money that comes out of the federal government into the area agencies on aging, primarily designed for nutrition, but as the gentlemen here know, it's also used for transportation and a host of other things. Because the federal government is now reauthorizing that act, and because they put out new regulations for it, they now want to extend those feelers into all sources of funds that may help to support this population. That's the battle that we have on our hands at the federal level.
Let's talk some more about transportation, Roy, now that you bring it up, because I know that's part of the priorities in the plan, too. Independence in transportation. And without transportation, all of a sudden you can be isolated, of course. What do you suppose the plan can do for this?
Transportation is probably the most difficult nut to crack, even more difficult than housing.
There's some out there, though, so let's understand that first.
Yes. There is some out there, and obviously we have shared ride programs. We have, again, the lottery funding some transportation, off-peak hours for older adults and so on. There's some speculation that we might be able to use Uber drivers or Lyft drivers to also be able to do this. But once, and some of that is conceivable in the urban and in certain suburban areas. Once you move out into the rural areas, that gets more and more difficult because the mass of people, the sparsity factor out there is such that it's extraordinarily expensive to try to provide any type of public transportation.
The sheer mileage between the clients?
Yes. Yeah. So that's probably the toughest nut to crack. And frankly, I don't have the answer to that, nor have I met anyone else yet that does. So, but they're trying a number of things, and that's what we have to do.
All I keep hearing about is a federal infrastructure program to fix our highways and bridges. But as far as this population is concerned.
Well, and it also speaks to some of the other challenges. It's not just distance, and it's not just, but rural communities face challenges that some people don't have driveways that aren't dirt. Okay, and getting a shared ride vehicle down those. Or the incline in the driveway is so high you can't get a shared ride vehicle up and safely get the person on board. These are real practical things that our shared ride drivers have to live with every day. They're trying to find solutions when they're out there, when they get to an address, but they just don't have the equipment. So thinking about our equipment differently, finding other ways with technology to solve some of these issues, they're the things we're going to have to sit and work on. The one-size-fits-all shared ride bus and the one-size-fits-all large transit bus, that's something we might need to move away from and find smaller solutions so we can meet some of these unique needs differently so that we can reach those rural communities. They have it the hardest in many instances, and we have to be cognizant that those older adults have that challenge on top of not being close to resources that we who live in urban settings oftentimes fail to take full advantage of.
And I think the other case to that is that the technology, as the Secretary is talking about, is you have to look into that. So why do people need to get out? Obviously for a whole host of reasons. Few of them are they need to go to a grocery store. Well, maybe they can get an app now that they can order their food online and it can be delivered right to their house.
Yes.
So that may help them in that sense. Or with regards to telehealth. Instead of, in the rural areas, driving an hour to, meet your physician, or what you can do is you can have them come right into your home via the screen,
right?
Do the blood work, do whatever you need, and right then and there without having to go out of your home. So the technology aspect of it, I think, is going to help us. Is it the answer? No. We still need to figure out this transportation and how we're going to do that in rural, suburban, and urban areas. But I think that the technology might help out a little bit.
And I loved what you said earlier, too, about this is working together. So this means you need to work with the township, you wouldn't need to work with the county commissioners, you need to work with whomever's in that local service area. The beauty of our system, the beauty of the aging system is we are local solutions. So we are right there, boots on the ground, with the support of the department, with the support of great partners. There's nothing we can't do, but we can't do it alone, we have to do it together.
I think this also brings up the idea that broadband is all part of this. Because as Bill and the Secretary have said, there's a lot of these things we can do with technology if we have the broadband available to do it. And of course, Pennsylvania is moving in that direction as well. Perhaps not as fast as we need to, but it's one of those solutions that can be worked into this whole plan.
And you would think that in this day and age that people would have service wherever they go in Pennsylvania. That's not the case.
Still not the case.
I've had members of AARP members that have gone to their house and they'll show me there's no cell service here, no bars. We have to go to the top of the mountain. It's in a very rural area, top of the mountain, and they'll get maybe a bar or two, and that's it. And that's the only way. We definitely need to get broadband across the Commonwealth.
What kind of funding is this governor planning on expanding broadband anyway? In other words, Jason, what is the status of improving our broadband capability here in Pennsylvania? Because it's so important. The more we do this show, the more I realize that.
Well, I mean, not that I'm the right person to speak to it, okay, but I can say from an administration point of view, there's a huge investment in trying to expand our broadband. The governor and the administration and the partners are all focused on these communities that exist everywhere I've traveled to, all across Pennsylvania. That we need to bolster that for economic reasons, for connection, for practical reasons like the services.
We were talking about communication before, and having communication, you can avert a crisis.
Correct.
Yeah. Sure.
And that's the direction the world is moving. But the Commonwealth is working very hard to improve that access everywhere and eliminate this as an issue as fast as it can be.
And this is definitely a bipartisan issue. It's both sides are coming together on this one. I know that Governor Shapiro is working closely with the Republicans in the legislature to really figure this out. There are some federal dollars that have come down, and they're figuring out how they can do this. How do they lay the broadband, throughout the state and get it there? How do we have classes to help people learn how to utilize the technology that we have is also part of that broadband aspect.
No question. I continue to learn that technology myself. Now let's consider another priority the governor's brought up for the plan for aging Pennsylvanians, and it has to do with caregiver support. And we've acknowledged this a couple times in our program already, but I bet they had a whole lot to say at these hearings, these listening sessions you talked about, Secretary. And what is their point of view? What do they need? What can government provide them with right now?
We should come back and do a whole segment on caregivers. We really should. It is so important. And it really is the centerpiece of what we're building here today. the caregiving industry and both the paid and unpaid caregivers are really what's helping people stay in their homes. Okay, so we talk about unpaid caregivers, and we talk about those that are
they're usually family.
They're family or very close friends, and they're working a part-time job. In addition to what they do every day,
they have demands on their time too.
So we know they're putting in between 21 and 25 hours a week, in addition to working a full-time job and doing all the other life responsibilities that they have. We know that there's stress involved with that. We know that they need better access to resources. They need help and quick help in finding resources that they can use to support themselves as they care for someone. And that's why navigation is so critical to this plan. And for the first year investment, navigation and navigation services are so critically important. So it's a quick way for older adults and caregivers to get connected to the resources that they need. So we have these caregivers that also are in danger of burnout. And when a caregiver becomes burned out, bad things happen. One, they might not be able to continue caregiving, and that older adult has to go into a higher level of care. Two, they run the risk of becoming a protective services issue just because of the sheer stress and exhaustion. So by supporting our caregiver network, by giving them the resources, by building out the toolkit that we propose to do, they'll have access to respite and information resources and other resources that makes the job of caregiving just a little bit easier and gives them that little bit of life back that they need, so they can go get their haircut, that they can go do a family function and know there's a resource to help care for their loved one.
Just a simple break like a haircut can help.
Without a doubt. Just a simple meal. Having lunch provided to their loved one is a respite service, because that's one less meal that they have to prepare every day.
And I think the other piece of that too is the education piece. So yes, letting people know about the programs that are out there, but also there's a community. You're not in this alone. Correct. You know, you may be pulling your hair out at certain times, but someone else is as well.
That is important to know that there are people out there with the exact same problems that you have.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. And in terms of respite, the Adult Day Services Program is one of the best things out there. And I say that with full disclosure because I also represent them. But the fact of the matter is that the service they truly provide to the caregiver is the ability for that caregiver to go out and do their full-time job, make sure that in their own knowledge that their loved one is being cared for well, and then when they come back home at night, they have their loved one for the rest of the evening and so on. So it provides them with respite. It also provides them with less stress trying to balance their job as well as the care. And it's the least expensive method of providing this sort of service. The most expensive, of course, is a nursing home. That's why we try to use home and community-based services to the greatest extent possible to avoid having someone to be placed into a nursing home. The in-home care, if you have someone come in one-on-one or you have a homemaker come in and so on, that can vary. But the estimate roughly is $59,000 a year on a full-year basis, as opposed to $19,500 for adult day. Assisted living, $49,200. We noticed that our Community Health Choices group that is taking care of those individuals that are both Medicare and Medicaid eligible has now spoken with the Department of Human Services about testing the idea of having people placed in assisted living facilities, because they've discovered that, gosh, that's $49,000 a year, whereas in-home care is $59,000 a year. Maybe we're not doing the right thing that we should be doing, all right? So there's all these opportunities out there, but it's very difficult to convince a legislator to put some money up front now to avoid a greater cost later. They're just not, it's not easy to sell cost avoidance. And it never ceases to amaze me that the very same conservative business people who understand that you have to spend money to make money don't seem to be able to understand that you can spend money to avoid spending more money later. But it really is as simple as that.
And Roy, you were a lawmaker yourself, so you know what you speak of.
I do, because I was learning all about this firsthand.
Government can be a slow, deliberative system, right?
Yes, it can be. And that's not all bad.
Right.
But there are times when some things just don't make sense no matter how many times they've been said.
And I don't want to lose the fact, the cost of services is important. Obviously, it's something that we have to keep in the back of our head. But this service is particularly good for the older adult. Yes. It keeps them socialized. It gives them a sense of independence. It gives them a sense of purpose as well. It's a great service. for all the reasons that Roy said, but most importantly because I was just visiting one on Friday, and that you can see the simple joy in the participants, and you can see firsthand the wonderful care that they have, and the camaraderie that they have, which really cuts down on social isolation, it really improves their overall health and well-being.
You feel better when you get to talk to somebody.
It's exactly right, and in the same time, their loved one has that respite that they so desperately need.
And you'll also see too in the governor's plan that he does realize, we've talked a lot about community because that's where people want to age in place. However, we all realize that you need the spectrum.
Yes.
You need everything from staying in your home all the way up to high-level nursing home care. We understand that, and there's a lot in between, as Roy was pointing out. And I think the Aging Our Way PA, the governor's plan, really dives into a whole bunch of those. Again, it makes you think. It makes us think. It makes the legislators think. It makes local officials think about what we need as we move forward to make Pennsylvania better to age in place.
Now, how can you make other options look attractive, however, for someone who insists on staying at home, but it's clear that it's just not a good idea?
That's a really difficult conversation to have with the individual, and that's a one-on-one conversation, and that's where your area agency on aging and their other community partners become your lifeline on the front lines, because they're the ones with the family.
Would they come out and counsel on something like that?
Yes, they do, and it's probably happening in one of our service areas right now as we speak. They're talking to an older adult that it's just not a good idea, but this still is a country where we have our rights, and as long as the person has decision-making ability and capacity, they can make bad choices. And as much as it pains all of us, and we don't like to see it, they still have the right to make those decisions for themselves. Our job is to guide them, counsel them, offer them as much support as we can, and continue to work with them to hopefully get them to arrive at the place where they can make the decision and decide to make a change that could be for their better.
So I pointed out that the governor has 5 priorities in this plan for aging Pennsylvanians. We've already gone over 4: aging in a healthy and active way, eliminating barriers while staying in familiar surroundings, independence in transportation, caregiver support, and how about the last one? We're kind of going full circle here, but it has to do with education, because you got to promote the awareness of these programs. And that makes me think about, is direct mail still an effective way to get through, or is it mostly internet for older Pennsylvanians?
It's still there. It's the most expensive way to get their attention.
Even putting a card in the mail?
Yeah,
it's still the most expensive way to do it.
It is, yeah. So again, going back to the technology, more and more individuals coming up through the ranks of aging they know how to operate an app. They know how to do more and more on their phones. My kids, they don't watch television anymore. Everything is on their iPads or all the movies, sports, everything they want is at the tip of their fingertips. So I think we need to move in that direction as well. And the plan does talk about technology and being able to do that in a whole host of ways.
And I think that what we saw was information sharing happens across the spectrum. Older adults, there's 60 to 100 is a long period of time. We have younger, older adults that like technology and want everything to come across on their phone. And we even have some older adults who like technology and want things to come across their phone or their iPad. And then we have the same in between. They like print, and then they like email. So, but putting that spectrum to the side, because everybody has a preference. What we heard most from older adults is they need trusted sources of information. They want something akin to a phone book where they can pick up and they know that the information is solid on the inside.
This information can be a crisis these days.
Yes,
it is.
So while we have great partners like AARP that has trusted resources and information, we need more of a trusted source out there for older adults to look to, and that's what they told us they want. So they didn't so much have a medium that they pushed us towards. They pushed us towards safe and reliable sources of information.
Yes, and we found the difficulty that we had in advising older adults to beware of scams by the telephone and so on worked very well until COVID came along. And then as people were trying to contact them about COVID and about getting tested and all that sort of thing, they refused to answer the telephone because they didn't recognize the number.
Very interesting.
Or if they did answer the telephone, they didn't believe it.
Somebody had a vital message for health and they couldn't get through.
Exactly. Yeah. So for every good thing, there's also an opposite that could happen if we don't pay careful attention to it. And that's why it's so important to get the message out in all possible avenues that we can. Older adults still watch and listen to television more than anything else because they know how to work it. It's something familiar with them. Even if they can't see well or hear well, they can turn the volume up. They don't necessarily care if they can't see it. They can listen to it. Turn the titles off the bottom of the screen.
Yeah,
exactly right. And the same thing is true with weekly newspapers. They really love weekly newspapers. I found this every place I travel in the Commonwealth. They might use it for the bottom of the birdcage, but they keep it around and they keep it all week long, as opposed to dailies, which are almost out of existence in many places. The weeklies still exist. So any method we can utilize to get the message out as economically as possible is good for us.
And I think that to follow up on Roy's point, after the pandemic, things have changed. So yes, there's a lot of frauds and scams out there. However, we've been seeing at AARP that when we want to do educational pieces, being in communities is just important. That face-to-face, the touch, being there. However, we have gotten thousands of individuals to join us for educational programs, through the internet, and having the virtual touch there. They can sit in their homes. Some have a little bit of problem, navigating it, but for the most part, people have joined us across the board for financial issues, healthcare, frauds and scams, you name it. We've been able to talk to them and reach so many people throughout the Commonwealth.
I think if you look at the older adults, the 80 and younger, we have that issue that works really well because most of us know how to, and I'm 79, so I know at the top of that line, all right? Most of us know how to work these kinds of electronic gizmos, and we figured it out if we didn't know. But once you get above that 80 group, I've found that they have difficulty. Even those who are trying hard to learn it are
That's
still
kind of the
having difficulty.
technological fall off cliff.
Right. I would say that, yes, yeah. And one of my colleagues is 84. He uses internet, all right, he uses email, but he still has a lot of difficulty trying to figure out why something didn't work the way it was supposed to work. And that just really puts him off. He's got to go see the Geek Squad, as they call it, about every 3 months or so to get things straightened out.
Or call up a grandson, maybe?
Well, he's tried that.
But I don't know if age has so much, because I have a 53-year-old who was in my office that has some of the same challenges. So I wouldn't necessarily make it an age thing.
There's a lot, too.
I think there's a lot of user error.
Yes.
Gentlemen, we went through the 5 priorities, and that's what the governor's calling them, the priorities for this plan for aging Pennsylvanians. And I couldn't help but notice, this is really getting into the nuts and bolts of it, but maybe, Jason, you can enlighten me. I understand this plan has, in addition to priorities, it has 36 strategies and 163 tactics. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to name all 163 tactics, but I am going to ask you, what's the difference here? Why include these words in this report? And it sounds like it's getting into something interesting.
Well, I think it's how we developed it is really important for implementation purposes because, again, this is a living document. All of these things are fluid and can change. So it's making sure that the goals we set out are achievable. Okay, and so when you look at our priorities this year and you look what we're trying to accomplish, one, we're trying to fix navigation, which they told us loud and clear. So our largest investment is reinventing the Pennsylvania Link, the ADRC, Aging and Disability Resource Center. It's not really talked about a lot. We don't talk a lot about it. It's out there. It's been around since 2011 across the state, and we don't hear people talk about it. But it's a free navigation resource that older adults have told us that we need to improve so that they can connect to some of these services that we've talked about today and that they can get the respite resources. We talk about making sure that we build out all these toolkits for caregivers, these toolkits for community services, these toolkits for emergencies, to help PEMA and help local fire departments and churches and other civic agencies. What happens, here we are right now in the heat wave that we talked about earlier. How do we make sure that those older adults are connected, that we know that they're okay? What do they do in those situations? Who do the service people call? Working with PEMA to solve some of these everyday emergencies, not just the catastrophes, the everyday emergencies. And supporting constituent services and doctor's offices and dentist offices and other church offices, frankly. Connect to our resources. That's what all of these toolkits do, aside from also helping marginalized communities and communities with language barriers. We talk about language barriers and we immediately go to English as a second language, but we forget those individuals that are hearing impaired or visually impaired. And we have to make sure that all languages are accounted for. So this is what we're looking at in the first year of the plan, building out these services, enhancing services that already exist, that are work that's already being done across the Commonwealth, but also importantly, building a better transparency so that we can see that the work we're doing is measurable in real time, that people can see the progress that's being made, and people can also see where we're struggling. Okay, when you talk about the direct care workforce and the challenges we have there, that's going to be a tough measure.
You got to be able to measure your success,
right? And it's going to be a tough measure to hit. But if you know, are you seeing marginal progress? Are you seeing us slide back? Or are you seeing us move forward? It's important to be able to show the general public all of this.
And that's why I think that the governor and the secretary, right from the very beginning, knew they had to get all the agencies involved. You know, not that I'm saying that the agencies worked in silos, but there were programs that another agency didn't even know that it existed, or there was no education on it, or the outside world, the average Pennsylvania didn't know was there. I think what this plan does is it pulls that all together. The ADRCs is a one-stop shopping. You know, people hate when they get on a phone or if they go on the computer and they get pointed in all these different directions. I think what the governor and the Secretary Kuvulich are doing is letting people know, yes, there's a lot of programs out there right now. We need to pull them together, and we will find them for you. There's no wrong door here. We're going to be able to come, and you're going to be able to find what you need.
Now, I think directly what the governor has had to say about that bill, I mean, your comment exactly. He said, no single entity can address the holistic needs of the older adult population in our Commonwealth. So I'm guessing that one of the bigger challenges here was that coordination. Coordination can be tough, especially if you don't recognize immediately how valuable some departments' views may be.
Coordination is hard, and I think that's what the governor's calling to us is to work with your sister agencies, work with your community partners, and be the convener and bring people together. That's why the Long-Term Care Council is so valuable. Not only do we have wonderful leaders from the legislature like Senator Judy Ward and Senator Marie Collette and Senator Madden, or I'm sorry, and Representative Madden and Menser and Representative Kim, who's moved off the committee, but these leaders really were invested in helping the steering committee build out this plan. So, I mean, they help us convene people to the table, working also with Department of Human Services and Secretary Arkush and Acting Secretary Bogan for Department of Health and Secretary Jones for DDAP. All of these individuals have a stake in this plan, which is different than if it's the Department of Aging's plan. So they want to see this be successful for the older adults. It's about making sure that our state is the best state to become older in.
Now, whenever Pennsylvania proposes some kind of new government plan, it always makes me think of the value of not wanting to reinvent the wheel. In other words, in this case, according to the governor, there are 4 other states that have plans for aging. So in your mind, Jason, which state can we learn the most from?
Pennsylvania.
Good answer.
I think you went through a loophole in my question.
we are now the gold standard across the country.
No kidding?
We are.
Yes.
And it's because of how we did this together. In fact, in my very first cabinet meeting, I looked at my peers and I said, you don't believe me now, but we will all work together. Okay, and they really didn't realize how much their departments touch the lives of older Pennsylvanians. And at the end, and we just did our last, we just did a cabinet meeting just a few weeks ago. I came back, and the governor's office had asked me to present on Aging Our Way, and it's what I reminded them of those very first words I said to them. We will work together, and we did work together, and their teams were incredibly invested in getting this plan across the finish line with our partners, with communities all across Pennsylvania. So the way we did it, the way we listened as much as we did and took the feedback and how quickly we moved is what helped put us into the gold standard. But you can learn from all of our peers. We've had conversations with folks from California. I just was in D.C. a few weeks ago and was speaking with a woman from Texas talking about their plan and how much she really liked our plan. And we, as New York and other states work through this process, the conversations are extremely valuable. And looking at what other states have done, particularly as we look to build out a division for Alzheimer's and brain-related disorders. You know, you see great work happening in Utah and Georgia. We should be having conversations with those states, how we make that great work happen in Pennsylvania. And a lot of that is in Aging Our Way PA. It's about working through relationships and working with others to make something successful.
And I think that the best part of Pennsylvania's plan, Aging Our Way, is that it was, it was transparent and it was inclusive. Went to the Secretary and the AAAs went to every corner of the Commonwealth to get people to talk about this and let us know what they're feeling. I don't think they left a stone unturned. Everyone had say in this. It went public twice, so that people can look at the plan in the process. So the transparency through all of this, it's not the, we keep on calling it the governor's plan. It is the governor's plan, it's the people's plan. They had a lot to say about this in Pennsylvania, and it's everyone's plan, and over the next 10 years, we're gonna make it the right plan.
Now, someone who's been watching our program in the last 45 minutes might be thinking, that sounds great, fellas, that's a lot of talk, but what about action? My understanding is that the governor does have some funding in his new budget for this plan. What can you tell us about that, Jason?
This is our ask across the Department of Aging for investment in older adult services. So investment in the plan first and foremost to build out what the services that I just enumerated. We talk about LINK, we talk about toolkits, we talk about being transparent. All of that is in the first year ask. That is in our first year ask to help us get started, to propel Pennsylvania forward. And then we see the other asks that have been woven into that, and the ask for additional resources for the Area Agency on Aging, for not just Penn Care services that they do, like the options programs that we talked about, but for housing assistance specifically with the challenges older adults are facing with housing. And then we also ask for resources for the Alzheimer's and brain-related disorders office within the Department of Aging, something that was sorely been lacking in Pennsylvania for a long time. And by rooting it in a department, we can finally get to work moving in this area the way we should have been and we could be, with our sister agencies at the Department of Health and DHS and other partners. So I mean, this is a broad ask for the Department of Aging. It's a big ask for the Department of Aging, but as I said earlier, we have been unprepared as a nation, not just as a Commonwealth, for this day that we're living through. And we need to invest now to keep people out of a more expensive service array as they age.
Now, Jason, you called the governor's plan a living document, that it is subject to change. So I wonder if you were able to look into a crystal ball, what would be the next major press release from the governor's office that relates to what we're talking about? How do you think what we're talking about today will be manifested next for the public?
Well, I think we're working on multiple goals. We're working on an age-friendly designation, which making Pennsylvania an age-friendly state is incredibly important to us. It's been something that the department has long wanted to do, but we're making it a reality in this administration. We're seeing also some of the immediate changes. Anything that can be done with current funding is being done. We're trying to hit those goals and get those goals over the finish line even before we're out of the gate.
Our guests have been the State Secretary of Aging, Jason Kovulich, founder and president of the Offlerbach Group, Roy Offlerbach, and the PA State Director of AARP, Bill Johnston Walsh. Thanks, everyone. That's it for Focus on Aging Adults. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.
Focus on Aging Adults is sponsored in part by AARP.